Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, back with another Audio Amigo review for y'all. Today we're going to be taking a look at what is now the top of Kefine's IEM range. It is the Quatio, a new hybrid IEM that sits at the top of their stack, priced at $130 US. It packs a pair of dynamic drivers and Kefine's first implementation of balanced armatures. Does the Quatio here do enough to stand out in what is becoming a very crowded $100 to sort of $130 price bracket? Let's see. First, however, my usual disclaimer, the Quatio here was sent to me by HiFiGo for review. I'm not being paid for this video, but because I could turn around and sell these if I wanted to, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thank you so much to HiFiGo for sending these out, and thanks to all of you watching for your continued support. Alright, the unboxing experience here I think suits the top-of-the-line Kefine product just fine. Inside the box you will find the IEMs, a modular cable, a pair of nozzles, black and gold. I actually have the black ones on there currently. The stock nozzles are these silver-colored ones, and here are the gold ones. Those unlock two different tunings, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You also get two boxes with different ear tips. You get 4 different styles total. You get wide or narrow bore of these black silicone ones, as well as wide or narrow bore of these white ones. These are a different sort of profile and shape, and these also are a little bit softer than the black ones, so it's nice to get a choice of 4 different types of tips there. You also get the 4.4 millimeter modular connector for the cable, and a nice black sort of leatherette case with the Kefine branding on it. It's got decent crush resistance. It does bow in a little bit in the middle, but around the edges it's pretty solid. In the inside, we find the standard sort of mesh pouch arrangement here. The inside material here isn't super soft, but it's not the sort of thing that I would worry about scratching my IEMs either. Overall, I would say this is a pretty comprehensive accessories package, only really missing the sort of nice-to-have things like, cleaning brushes, shirt clips, that sort of thing. Nicer ear tips would have been nice, but for 130 bucks, I'd say this is right in line with what I expect in terms of accessories. All right, let's take a closer look at that cable. What we have here is a 4-wire braid that breaks up into 2-wire twists at the Y-split. It's got this sort of grayish-brownish color with the exposed wires on the inside that I kind of dig. The plastic coating is maybe a little bit rubbery, but it doesn't come across as sticky or overly plasticky in the hands. It's well behaved with no real microphonics or memory. As you can see, it works pretty good. The amp connector here is a screw-on modular termination, which y'all know that I prefer. The index marks are very clear on both sides of the connection, and the little nut that secures the connector on there also works great as a little grip point for pulling this out of stubborn amps and things. Also the nice Kefine branding on there. The Y-split, nicely, is also branded. Has, let me see, there you go, it has Quatio written on it, which I quite like, and it matches the rest of the hardware nicely. The chin slider is quite difficult to move thanks to the friction from that rubbery cable, but it sits flush against the Y-split and it stays put very solidly when you're using it as a chin slider, which works well. The ear hooks are comfortable. The 2-pin connectors, again, match the rest of the hardware and have decently clearly labeled right and left stereo indicators on them. They sit flush against the shelves, which is a bonus. I like that they're not using recessed pins here. I do wish that the plastic there was colored red to make the right and left indication a little bit clearer. Other than that, though, I like this cable. It's nice. I think it's perfectly at home on a $130 IEM, and I think it works well. So as far as build quality is concerned, Kefine has a very standard sort of design language with all their other IEMs. It's an all-metal affair, in this case with metal swappable nozzles. Something interesting here is if you remove the nozzles, not only can you see the sort of dual BA poking its head there, you can see the nozzle, you can see it there, yeah. It's sort of right there. There's the nozzle for the dual BA. But as you can see, there's a mesh filter on the inside of the IEM as well as the one that's on the nozzle. I like that. It adds a second layer of protection in case debris or some foreign objects get in there while you're nozzle swapping. It's a super nice touch. It shows that Kefine puts some extra thought into things. I think it's rather nice. In terms of ventilation, you can see there's no vents here on the inside of the IEM. You just have the one here on the back. I didn't experience any pressure buildup or driver flex here on the Quatio, so clearly that vent is more than enough to vent all the drivers here on the inside. Didn't have any problems at all. Outside of that, it's a fairly standard looking shell. There's no other acoustic features or structures anywhere on the faceplate or anything. Yeah, being all metal feels nice and solid. You've got the classic 2-pin sockets there. I can see these being pretty sturdy and durable long term. You can see the seam where the sort of faceplate attaches. Unless that pops off, these should be just as durable as any other all metal IEM. So let's go ahead and take a look under the hood and bring up the specs for the Quatio here. This is a 2 dynamic driver, 2 balanced armature set. You have an 8mm polyurethane plus liquid crystal polymer dynamic driver for the low-end bass frequencies. You have a full range 10mm DLC diaphragm dynamic driver working the entire frequency range. And then you have a pair of helper BAs that we saw in the little nozzle hole there doing work at 5 kHz and above. This 4-driver combo is super easy to drive, and there's no need to run out and buy a dongle for these, especially since they do not change overall frequency response with impedance adapters or higher output impedance sources, making it more suitable if you have an older or less clean source or don't have the money to buy a dongle for these. Weight for this whole kit is around 43 grams, with the individual IEMs coming in at just over 7 grams each. The nozzles are just a little bit under 6.5 millimeters, putting them a little on the larger side. Overall, though, nothing too crazy in terms of nozzle size or weight. The fact that you don't need a dongle for these is quite nice. In terms of specs overall, then, nothing too crazy. And now we come to the cool wall. As I mentioned earlier, Kefine's design language across their IEMs is largely similar. They go for a minimalistic, sort of clean, stealth, understated elegance sort of thing. Sometimes it can come across a little bit boring. Here on the Quatio, they have a very sleek-looking sort of teardrop, smooth, sleek shape. A little bit of a white ring that's actually cut into the faceplate there, along with the Kefine logo that's cut into the faceplate. Yeah, you get Kefine branding and this white ring, and that's it. So yeah, I think like the Delci and the Clean before it, I'm going to end up putting the Quatio in bland. It just doesn't do a whole lot for me. I get their design goals, I get their design, sort of process. It just doesn't stand out for me in any way, positively or negatively, so bland it is. If the previous Kefine IEMs are any indication, then I don't think the Quatio is going to do too well in the eyes of the Council of Ladies, but let's see. Yeah, not too good. It's 3 not pretties and 2 mehs, which, yeah, I can understand. That should mean no compliments at all on these, and yep, not a single yes on this question. As far as their thoughts go, I love the just another K-cup line, lady number 2 with another banger here. But outside of some positivity from lady number 3, there's not a whole lot of positive sentiments going on here. As I said earlier, the design language of Kefine is pretty standardized and consistent, just sort of industrial and understated, not flashy, cute, elegant, or pretty in any way, and I think that's evident in the thoughts of the ladies. When it comes to comfort, the Quatio here are doing nothing too crazy in terms of design. You've got no wings, no recessions, no bulges, no protrusions, nothing of that sort. Just your standard sort of IEM teardrop shape with a standard size nozzle, no real problems. For me, that meant long hours of comfort, no problems wearing these for long periods of time, 3, 4, 5 hours, no issues at all. Shells weren't heavy for me, and yeah, no issues. My wife, however, was not so lucky. These failed the tiny ears test with a score of bad. The shells were just too large for her overall. The seal that she was able to achieve failed almost immediately, and any movement, speech, or laughter just meant these slid out of her ears. So if you have tiny ears, try to audition these before you buy them. They did not work for her at all. But let's go ahead and start talking about how these sound, and to do that, I need to bring back the replacement nozzles here. Because you do get 3 separate tunings here. The black nozzles are what I call the warm nozzles. These have more boosted bass, subdued vocals, and a calmer treble compared to the other 2. The gold nozzles are what I will call the bright nozzles. Those are silver. The gold nozzles are what I'll call the bright nozzles. The bass is toned down a little bit compared to the other 2, but it's still boosted overall. Female vocals are a little bit more forward and more energetic, and while the treble sees a noticeable increase, it's not super insane compared to the other 2. The silver nozzles are sort of the middle-of-the-road option. They do lean closer to the black nozzles than the gold ones here. I personally think all 3 sound pretty nice. I'll try to articulate the differences between them in my music section. Just know that I think all 3 of these sound noticeably different to each other, and each individual one is worth checking out. I think if you buy this set, spend some time with each one, pick your favorite. So we'll start as is usual with the bass, and like with the rest of the frequency range, as you'll see, your experience here is going to depend on which nozzle you end up choosing. The gold nozzles are the most subdued and controlled across the bass, but even they have a pretty hefty bass boost going on. The sub bass with all of them rumbles rather nicely, and there's great punch and slam in the mid bass, especially with the black nozzles. The texture of the bass is okay. I feel like some of the deeper drops in the Teddy Killer's pump with the pegboard nerds were a little bit soft for my liking, but only the really low and quick ones were lacking in texture overall. Most of the higher frequency or sort of slower drops were nice and satisfying. I think it's interesting. This is the second set I've seen that has used a sort of dedicated 8mm sub-bass dynamic driver, and I have found both of them soft so far. Maybe something about this setup just doesn't gel with my specific ears. Kick drums and bass guitar are better though. The deep rumbly bass guitar at the start of Steely Dan's Cousin Dupree sounds fantastic on all three nozzles. The string buzz is clearly audible. It is stronger on the silver and especially the black nozzles compared to the gold ones, but all three of them have what I would say is a satisfying, deep, rumbly, punchy bass presentation. My only complaint here being the softer than usual texture. That bass boost has warmed up the lower mids, and no matter which nozzle you use, you will get that sort of warmer, heavier tonality to the lower mids that you may or may not prefer. I think that tracks like Higher by Creed benefit from this sort of tonality. The vocals and the lower guitar chords enjoy a richer, heavier intonation. The distortion is very clear. The guitars, the drums, and the bass are well separated. There's no real masking issues going on here. The black nozzles are warmer than the gold by a fair bit, and the silver as well, but by a smaller margin. They all enjoy a warmer tonality overall. It's just the gold ones are a little bit less so. Female vocals, again, is going to depend on which nozzle you choose. The black ones have vocals a little bit further back compared to the instrumentation, but not to the point where they're tonally compromised or ruin the replay. They're just not as spotlit as I can prefer on some tracks. Anri's I Can't Stop the Loneliness, for example, the black nozzles have her either in line with the instrumentation, specifically the piano, or slightly behind. She just sounds a little weaker than on the gold or silver nozzles. With the gold nozzles, she's more forward, more spotlit compared to the instrumentation, but not in an unnatural way. I wouldn't call it super vocal focus, just more forward than like a normal neutral presentation. Both of these tonalities I think work, and there really isn't any obvious tonal aberration to the vocals. Overall, I would say the mids are a bit warmed up on the low end, and female vocals can go from forward and slightly spotlit to a little bit recessed and a bit more subdued. So again, it all depends on the nozzles you choose. Female vocal harmonics and upper mids in general are kind of interesting here. The black nozzles have them a little bit more subdued compared to some of the fundamentals, whilst the gold nozzles have them more energetic. The backing vocals, the echoes, and specifically the beatboxing in Maury Calliope's Go Getters, for example, on the black nozzles, the harmonics that the beatboxing and that sort of thing throws off, they're present, but they don't feel dominant or sort of overcooked in the mix. They're just there enough so that the vocals have some more presence to them. The gold nozzles, on the other hand, can get a little energetic, and depending on the track, they can get a little sibilant. If you're sensitive to S and T sounds, specifically on female vocals, I would recommend against the gold nozzles here. Treble on the Quatio is a bit more straightforward. While the treble will change depending on which nozzle you choose, even the bassier, more subdued black nozzles are quite energetic, specifically in the lower and mid treble. The bell hits on the cymbals of Dio's Holy Diver can get quite energetic even on those black nozzles, and if you are treble sensitive, avoid the gold nozzles at all costs. They can be quite sharp, borderline sibilant, and sort of fatiguing. Not the case for me, but I can easily see how it would be for people who are treble sensitive. Curiously, the upper treble energy does roll off a bit, meaning that the wash on those cymbals can be a little bit flat in some tracks. It's not what I would call music ruining, it's just this set is lacking a bit of airiness compared to what I usually like. Overall, I feel the presentation is energetic with all the nozzles. You just pick how sharp you want the harmonics to be and how energetic you want the overall harmonics to be compared to the rest of the mix. In terms of technicalities, while I do think that the 8mm dynamic can be a bit soft with the bass, it can still resolve those lower frequency events rather well. Tevaka's Logo Te Pate, for example, has a lot of deep drums and male vocals. The Quatio, even with the gold nozzles, I think does a pretty good job picking up on the differences between like an edge hit on the drum and the center of the drum skin hits and the sort of sliding texture on some of them. It does well. Even if I do think the texture could be a little bit better, it gets the job done. The upper mids and treble are quite nice. Quatio did pretty well in my Waltz for Debbie test, with the more energetic treble helping it pick up some of the more subtle glassware hits. The boosted bass, however, did obscure some of the background conversation a bit, and the lack of airiness also kept some of the glass hits sounding a little flat. I would say, compared to other hybrid IEMs, I would put this set as sort of a match for the Yaksha or the Defiant. It doesn't quite reach Supermix 4 levels of technical performance. I think it's a perfectly appropriate level at this price point. For stereo separation and 3D soundstage, I thought the Quatio did rather well. The drums in the introduction to Bonnie M's Rasputin fill the space behind you nicely. There's really nice stereo separation as they move from left to right and then back again. I think it replayed very nice here. In terms of perceived 3D soundstage, the Quatio won't crush down well-mastered tracks, but it won't elevate them too much either. The 2001 remaster of the Beach Boys' Good Vibration, for example, I feel like the remaster has a bit more of that stereo and positional information in it, and the Quatio lets you pick up the various instruments in the sound field pretty well with pretty solid imaging. The stage has some decent depth to it. I wouldn't say that it's anything special, and I would say overall that this is about average in terms of stereo separation and perceived 3D soundstage, at least compared to sort of the other hybrid IEMs at this price point. So, depending on which nozzles you use, the Quatio is essentially 3 slightly different flavors of V-shaped, from warm V with the black nozzles to a bright-leaning V-shape with the gold nozzles. This was a very interesting comparison listening session. The fact of the matter is, you, the buyer, have a lot of great options in this specific price point. There are a bunch of options in this price range. I'm going to try and break down what I feel are the most popular ones and try to relate to you why some of them might be a little bit better than the Quatio in some ways or a little bit worse than the Quatio in others. And again, I don't think any of these are better than the other necessarily. They're just different in certain ways. But we'll start with Zeos's new baby. It's been getting a lot of attention. The Juzear Defiant, priced at $100 US. If you equip the gold nozzles on the Quatio, you can get close-ish to the tonality of the Defiant, but with a couple of key differences. Despite the extra DD here, I actually prefer the bass texture on the Defiant over the Quatio. The silver and black nozzles have noticeably more thump and punch, but I prefer the bass quality on the Defiant over the quantity on the Quatio. While these two are roughly similar there, where they differ the most is in the treble. Even with the chilled out black nozzles equipped, the Quatio still carries more energy throughout the lower treble than the Defiant, meaning it's not as safe if you're sensitive to sibilance or that sort of tonality in that area. However, the Defiant is airier and more energetic in the upper treble, so if you're sensitive in that area, the Quatio would be the safer choice. I do feel like the Defiant can be the more detailed of the two, but I wouldn't say either of these is a technical beast, and in certain tracks I can see them going either way. Overall, if you want an airier, more colorful sounding IEM, I think that the Defiant can be an option, but if you value being able to sort of personalize and choose your tuning a bit more, the versatility of the Quatio could be a better choice. Next up, we have the Simgot EM6L Phoenix, priced at $115 US. The stock silver nozzles on the Quatio are probably the closest match to the Phoenix. The black nozzles are similarly warm in the lower mids, but much bassier. I do feel like this is another case of quality over quantity in terms of bass, and while the Quatio does have more rumble, it just feels more cohesive on the Phoenix in terms of overall bass. For fatigue, again, I feel like the Phoenix does have more overall treble energy, but if you use the gold nozzles, the lower treble on the Quatio can be more intense, specifically if you're sensitive to sibilance, that sort of thing. If you found the EM6L fatiguing, the Quatio might be safer for you, but only if you use the black nozzles or are particularly sensitive to the upper treble energy on the Phoenix. I do feel like the Phoenix is a step ahead of the Quatio in terms of overall resolution and technical performance, but the Quatio, again, has that potential for customization and does have a much nicer accessories package versus the Phoenix. Now we have one of my favorite sets, not just in this price range, but full stop. It's the AFUL Explorer, priced at $120 US. Of everything on the table, the Explorer is easily the most sort of different sounding. It's got a warmer, more bass and mid-centric tuning compared to everybody else here. The bass texture here is great, and interestingly, compared to the Quatio, despite the more subdued upper mids and lower treble, the Explorer actually has a bit more airiness and is a bit more resolving at the very top end compared to the Quatio. The Quatio is the more vocal forward set, even with the black nozzles, and it just has a bit more punch to it in the bass in certain areas. And with the gold nozzles, it can morph into a brighter tuning with more sparkle and shine, more of a V-shaped set. If you are treble sensitive, or you think you might be treble sensitive, I think the Explorer is by far the safest option here, especially if you want something that still has a bit of airiness. I still think this is an absolute winner of a set. This will make anybody happy. The Quatio is more versatile. It has a better accessories package, and it has more of that treble energy that some people really enjoy. Yeah, it's still a good option. Personally, I still take the Explorer. But finally, let's bring back the Kinera Celest Yaksha, priced at $130 US. These two, as I mentioned in my review of the Yaksha, are very, very similar to each other. Similar tunings, similar driver configuration, similar packaging, similar sort of weakness with the 8mm bass driver, in my opinion. Both bass texture on both of these is a bit softer than I would like. Silver nozzles here on the Quatio are basically the same tuning as the Yaksha. Again, it has more energy in that lower treble area, and it isn't as vocal forward as the Yaksha. Personally, I did find the Yaksha just a hair airier with certain tracks and instruments compared to the Quatio, but as a general rule, I found both of these sets had that upper treble roll-off, at least for my ears and my tastes. If you value customization and you don't want something as ostentatious as this, I think the Quatio is an easy choice here. However, if you want something more stylish and safer in terms of sibilance, if you know you're sensitive to that sort of lower treble energy, grab the Yaksha instead. So, as I said in my Yaksha review, if you see your IEM here on the table, congratulations, you've got a great IEM. If I didn't own any of these at all and I was gifted one of these at random, I would be very happy with any of these. But let's go ahead and talk sort of differences in general tonality. Explorer. The warmest set here. If you're treble sensitive, this is the safest set by far. Great all-rounder, fantastic bass texture, good details. I still love it. It's awesome. Stepping up in terms of overall sort of treble tonality, we have the Yaksha. A little more upper mids and treble, more forward vocals, great looks, solid performer. Even if it is lacking a little air compared to the Explorer, I still think it's a good, solid set. Similarly, you have the Quatio. Not as forward with the vocals as the Yaksha, but has some lower treble brilliance that can add good sparkle and shine to your tracks. Just be careful which nozzles you use, as the gold can be a little bit hot, and even the black nozzles, if you're sensitive to sibilance, can be a bit energetic. Next up, we have the Defiant. It doesn't pack the same lower treble punch that the Quatio does, but it makes up for that with clearer, more present mid-range and airier, more pronounced upper treble, giving it that sort of more complete sound in the treble. Very, very colored sound, but a lot of fun. Finally, you have the EM6L, the oldest set on the table and the most traditionally V-shaped of these sets. You've got good energy all over the entire upper mids and treble, very balanced, very smooth, nice and warm on the low end. Another great choice if you can handle its overall upper mids and treble energy. Yeah, honestly, these are all good. I think if you're going to choose between these, you should try to figure out where you might be sensitive to potential ear fatigue issues before you pick one. And if you don't know if you're sensitive or not, you just want to play it safe, Explorer. But speaking of picking one, let's go ahead and pull up the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale and talk about why you might pick the Quatio. We'll start off with a very solid accessories package. Modular cable, good case, good selection of ear tips, and nozzles that actually make a difference in the overall listening experience. The design is fairly generic, but there are lots of people who prefer a more subtle-looking IEM. The tuning here, again, is going to depend on which nozzle you use, but I feel like all of them are variations of a V-shaped sound signature with boosted bass and pretty energetic lower treble that can at best be sparkly and energetic, and at worst be sibilant and sharp, depending on your ears. The sub-bass texture here can be a little soft in heavier, more demanding songs, but the overall tonality I think is pretty good. I think Kefine honestly has a winner on their hands for their sort of first hybrid IEM. I'm going to be putting this up in This Is Brilliant, as I feel that the different nozzles, the customization options that it offers is very good, and the whole IEM from accessories to build quality I think is very well thought out. If you're treble sensitive, again, I think the black nozzles might be tame enough that you'll be okay, but if you're really sensitive to that sort of lower treble area, there's lots of other options at this price range that don't have that sort of energy. I do think this is a very solid choice. Even if it doesn't outright beat its rivals, it doesn't lose to them either, and I feel like it does enough things differently with the nozzles that it stands out. So, who do I recommend pick up a Quatio? Well, I don't recommend it for people who know they're sensitive to energy in the lower treble, as even the more chilled out black nozzles can be pretty excitable in that area. I also don't recommend this for people who are looking for a more neutral or sort of mid-centric presentation of sound, as the boosted bass and boosted treble just won't be to your liking here. If, however, you're looking for a nicely accessorized V-shaped set with good customization options to try and tailor the sound more to your tastes, I think the Quatio might be one of the best choices for you. It's also a great pick if you want a more subdued looking IEM that's not as crazy. I think all of these sets, except for maybe the Phoenix, look more, say, ostentatious than the Quatio, and that can be something that people look for. Finally, if you're new to IEMs and you're looking for a first purchase that will help you learn more about your personal preferences in tuning, maybe how much treble energy you can handle in certain places, I think that the Quatio with its nozzles can potentially help you dial in how much bass and treble you really like and help you figure out what you want for moving up in the price range. But that's going to wrap up my review for the Quatio. It's yet another solid IEM in the $120-ish price bracket. Honestly, that whole price range, you're just spoiled for choice. Lots of sets, different tunings, they're all good in one way or another. It's getting really easy to buy an IEM in that price range, honestly. Speaking of spoiled for choice, bass heads, the Martillo review is coming up next, so look forward to that. Had a lot of fun listening to that set in preparation for that review. That's coming up shortly. But for now, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for watching and for all your continued support. I really appreciate it. I hope you've all enjoyed the video. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.